bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right, welcome, Fade to Black. How you doing? Today's Thursday, January 16th, 2025. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Let's do this, man. Very excited about the show tonight. And it's been a great week here on Fade to Black as well. And you can help support everything that we do around here. It's easy. Get yourself a Fade to Black t-shirt. Not what I'm wearing. A Fade to Black t-shirt. We have two shirts, two ways to get them. Game Changer membership. You can just order a shirt. Order both shirts. We have two versions, right? Everything is autographed. Everything includes shipping. And it just helps support everything that we do around here. We've got a big team. And yeah. We appreciate everything. All right. What a great week on Fade to Black. And trying to escape what is going on around here, right? So I am able to, it's an honor and a privilege, to come on to Fade to Black and for a couple of hours each night, 3 hours, just get my mind away from things and get my learn on. We did that Monday. Maureen Seberg was here. We did that Tuesday. Sheila Seppi, amazing conversation. Last night, Scott Wolter was here, and that was a barn burner of a show. And tonight, Fritz Zimmerman is with us. We're going to be talking about the dark side of ancient America. We'll get to Fritz in just a second. I want to remind everybody I have 5 major events coming up in the first half of 2025. Coming up in just a couple of weeks, I'm hosting the Conscious Life Expo right here in Los Angeles at the LAX Hilton. This is the biggest conference in the world. We normally expect between 15 and 20,000 attendees. Come and hang out with us February 7th through the 10th, 2025, right here in Los Angeles. Right after that is the Rise of the Guardians. This is March 29th and 30th, 2025 in Sedona, Arizona. The links for that are below. I'm hosting that as well. And then I'm heading to the Midwest for the Contact Modalities Expo. That is May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, 2025, Delavan, Wisconsin, Delavan Lake. And then back out here to California for Contact in the Desert, May 29th through June 2nd in Palm Springs, California. Then I'm headed down to Peru for the Inca Celebration of the Sun with Brian Forrester. That is June 17th through the 27th, 2025. I'm going to Peru twice this year. This is the first trip. Second trip is in November. All of the information that you need are in the links below. We've got a few spots left for this tour in June. All right, now this is where I get to the spot in the show where my old man brain takes over and I'm forgetting. This is what I wanted to say about today. Today was a pretty extraordinary day for space. And you can start with India. India docking 2 satellites. They're only the 4th country in the history of space exploration to pull this off, right? There was only 3 before that. Now it's 4. It's the United States, China, and Russia. Now India is on that list. So that happened overnight. Also overnight, Blue Origin, Amazon, Jeff Bezos, he launched his New Glenn rocket into orbit. The first stage didn't land on the platform out there in the Atlantic Ocean as planned, but it entered orbit. Yeah, so that happened. And then this afternoon, all of this in one day, SpaceX launched its Starship. Now, it did the chopsticks grab back at the launch pad of the first stage booster. That is pretty incredible to see, actually. Starship itself blew up, and the video that is out there of the debris re-entering is pretty incredible. So, but the chopsticks grab was there, but 3 launches like that, 3 big events all on the same day. Yeah, it's pretty interesting and pretty fun. Okay, all right. So with that, Fritz Zimmerman is with us tonight, and last week Fritz was scheduled to be with us, and a few things happened that day. One, the California fire started. I lost my power here. It came back. I lost my internet. It came back. I lost it again. Fritz, who is he's a Hoosier, by the way. We've got a fellow Hoosier on the show tonight. He started to feel a little fluish. So the show got canceled, and we don't normally cancel shows. I think I've canceled maybe, man, in overall all of these years, I think once, maybe twice. The show always must go on. And we canceled, but Fritz is back with us tonight. We're going to be talking about his book, The Dark Side of Ancient America. By the way, the links for his book on Amazon are below on our website and throughout social media. We're going to be talking about the mounds, the mound builders, giant skeletons, all of his work that he has done in investigating our ancient past here in the Americas. He's a researcher, he's an author, he's a lecturer, specializing in ancient American history and the mysteries of pre-Columbian cultures. Now, with the focus on the mound builders, and we're going to start with that tonight. Everything that you need for Fritz is below. I would like to welcome, for the first time to Fade to Black, Fritz Zimmerman. Fritz is right there. Fritz, good evening, young man.
Hey, good to be with you tonight.
Yeah, hey, we pulled it off, didn't we?
Yeah, feeling a little better this week.
You know, I it's a big deal, but with everything that's in the air, and I was already having issues. I had blown out my throat, like, I don't know, a month ago, and you can hear it. And now everything that could damage your lungs just burned up and is in the air here, right? Just like, you know, you can imagine everything, all those batteries and cars and household cleaning supplies and whatever, all that toxic stuff that all burned up and went in the air, and we're breathing it here. And now it's just, I can feel it. I can truly feel it. Now, Fritz, before we get started, you get the first time guest disclaimer, and that you have to accept so we can move on. And the disclaimer is this: Fritz, it's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends. Where the conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends, but we're going to end as friends. You have to accept, and we can move on.
I accept.
Oh, man. Tense moment there, Fritz. Tense moment. I'm a Hoosier. You're a Hoosier. You're in Fort Wayne tonight, right?
Yes.
And I'm actually going to start here. I'm going to start in your wheelhouse. When I was in 8th grade in Indianapolis, took a required class. It was called Indiana History. And my teacher, who was amazing, 8th grade. So I'm 12, maybe. I'm thinking 12. And he does a couple of weeks, and we have our Indiana history book. He introduces us to mounds and the mound builders. Now, at that time, never heard of it, right? And he shows us the maps of Indiana and where they used to be and what happened. And then, you know, he's talking about Ohio and Wisconsin and, you know, the whole area there, these mounds and the mound builders. And it was one of the most extraordinary, life-changing moments for me to think about how flat Indiana is, right? And then what used to be there before, and the mystery of the mound builders. Let's start there. Where did your interest? I just told you where I got mine. It was 8th grade. Where'd your interest start with the mound builders?
Well, for me, I have a degree from Purdue University, double major in history and radio, television, communications. And I didn't know anything about the mounds. Nothing. I mean, I have a degree in history, and I didn't read one page about the hinges, the geometric earthworks, the burial mounds, large skeletons, none of that. It wasn't until I'd gotten out of school, I'd worked for a CBS affiliate doing the weather, and then I wanted to, produce my own television shows.
Wait! You were the weatherman.
I did the weather for about a year and a half.
Wow. Okay.
On the CBS affiliate here in Fort Wayne.
Okay.
And no, it's one of those things. I mean, you do it, and then you've done it, and then now it's time just to move on in life.
Sure.
I know there's people that make a career. Well, here in Fort Wayne is where careers come to die. So we have people that are here for like 30 years because they're not any good at their job. So if they're any good, they do better than Fort Wayne. But if you're not any good, you end up here for 30 years.
Can we stop there for a second? In media, the audience may not understand what we're talking about, but there's a list that is distributed of markets. And
right, and there's about 200.
And there's 200 markets.
Fort Wayne's right in the middle.
And it's funny how in media, the jokes, you have to be on the inside to understand, but the market jokes about, where you end up and what you're dreaming to work towards, you're trying to go east or west as far as you can go. Right. Yeah. And most people don't know about the market list and who was on it and where you go to die, as they say.
Fort Wayne, Des Moines, that'd be a good place to die.
Yeah,
Wichita, that'd be a good place to die. So if you have absolutely no talent and you're looking to raise your family and all that, you're going to Fort Wayne, Des Moines, and you're lousy at your job and you're going to spend 20 years here because they're not going to get rid of you. Because who they're going to replace you with? Somebody else that's not any good.
And we're not offending anybody in the media markets because they know exactly what we're talking about right now. This is just, and wow. Okay. So you were the weatherman for a year and a half in Fort Wayne. What happens next?
So then leave there and I want to write a television show. So I come for this show called The Used Car Buffet. So it's, 6 dealers in an hour, and then you get your specialty car, and we take it out on the road and hanging out the windows and shooting cars and, doing my whole Cecil B. DeMille with cars, as best I can.
Right. I dig it.
And my partner, this is such a horrible story. I won't bring up his name, but he was a virgin. He was a pudgy man. But he never had a girlfriend before. Well, while we're shooting this show, and it's doing well, the Fox affiliate in Fort Wayne wanted it, and South Bend was interested in it. We were going, we were going to branch this thing out into markets. It was a good show. And anyway, his girlfriend told him he had to get a real job. And all right, and then I had I couldn't do it on my own. So I'm in the library and I'm, I'm just going to maybe shoot a little short documentary on something or other. I didn't know what. I came across burial mounds in Northeast Indiana And finding out they're thousands of years old. Like, why didn't I know any of this? I have a history major. Well, 14 years later, I had been to 700 burial mound and earthwork sites in Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Michigan. And I had visited 400 in Indiana. I did the first archaeological survey in Indiana. I visited 400 sites. I photographed 85. Only 3 are recognized as historical sites. I went over to Ohio. Every mound that is address restricted by the Ohio Historical Society, I reveal those, where everything is. Big mounds, I mean, mound size of a 3-story house is address restricted. Like, how crazy is that? You know, that's American history. How do you regulate who gets to know this and that? So 14 years in the field. Meanwhile, I'm collecting giants because here in Fort Wayne, we have the largest genealogical library in the country. That means no matter where you're in California, if you have a county history from the 1800s of Orange County, Ventura County, whatever it is, I have a copy of that 3 blocks from my house where I'm talking to you right now. Whatever state you're living in, now I'm dealing mainly with the Midwest, but I covered a thing, you know, the country for, you know, the Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants. So I had that available to me where I could find mounds. I had plat maps from the 1800s where if they said, you know, something was on the Johnson farm in Liberty Township, I could find a plat map from the 1800s, find out where Johnson lived, know that there was a mound there, go to that, and then find, you know, whether the mound was there, banging on doors, you know, banging on a lot of doors throughout those years. So, you know, I was in the right place at the right time. I could not have ever done that without this genealogical library and having access to the maps and everything else and the histories that I had. So that's what it starts. That's, you know, 14 years later, you know, then the encyclopedia comes out and, you know, some other books. So
now let's stay right here for a second. I think this is a very important point. One of the things that our teacher in the 8th grade pointed out to us, which again, it was a life-changing thing. And it stuck with me for 50 years, right? He said, and he was quite upset, by the way, about this. He was a great teacher. He said that farming took precedent over history. And if there was a mound, now I'm paraphrasing, right? This is 50 years ago. But he said, if there were mound or mounds on your land, but you wanted to grow corn, you could remove them. And they did. And he says, now he goes, there are notations of the mounds that were removed. They came in, did the land survey. You can see the surveys of where the mounds used to be, but now it's farmland and they are gone. Now, for me, I'm a kid. I was completely blown away that somebody would do something like this. How did that affect you when you found out that this was going on nationwide?
Well, you know, you only had maybe a 20% chance that anything would still be there when you went out. I mean, chances are is that it was plowed over. Now, of course, you could, you know, before you're going to the site, you've got quadrangle maps and some other thing. You know, we're talking, you know, I'm out in the mid 90s, late 90s. So, you know, we don't have LiDAR. There's no internet. You know, I'm going with maps. I'm going with quadrangle maps, you know, and I can see from there what's being farmed, what's not, where the high ridges were, where the mound would be. So, yeah, I mean, your chances of finding one, you know, was somewhat slim.
But I guess my question is, I was offended by the flagrant disregard to history and that nobody cared, nobody studied, nobody, inventoried or did anything. They just leveled these mounds so they could plant seeds. And I just found that so offensive.
They did, but you have to realize, this is the late 1800s.
Right.
The Miami Indians around here, they are sent to Oklahoma in the 1830s. But people don't realize Indiana was a bloodbath. I mean, there were so many settlers that were killed, beheaded, torture stakes. The British were paying the Indians $5 a scalp. And that was for men, women, children, babies, even fetuses were being paid by a man named Hamilton of the British Army. So there was a stake on every settler in Indiana. And it was not a safe place to be. And it was a bloodbath, a history that is completely unknown to Americans. And so what you have is this temperament of 60 years later of anything having to do with Native Americans was not worth saving. I mean, it had no historical value. It was something you did not want on your property. It wasn't something you were going to brag about. Now, the origin of the burial mounds, of course, that would come into question, through my research. It was not the Miami Indians that built any of it. But anyway, you have to realize that mindset of those people and what was going on here in 1790, 1800, 1810, and just what a bloodbath it was for these settlers and what they had to endure, with the Native Americans. So, that's the setup.
Now, when we okay, I actually want to ask a simple question. Do you have a favorite mound site? Is there one that just sticks out for you?
Oh yeah, by far it's the Newark Earthworks in Newark, Ohio, just about 20 miles east of Columbus, Ohio. And this is a circle and an octagon. And the octagon, each one of the gateways is aligned to one of the 8 lunar standstills in the moon's 18.6 journey from the north to the south. So you have your northern maximum moonrise. You have your northern minimum moonrise, minimum southern, maximum southern. But anyway, each one of these gateways of this octagon is aligned to one of these lunar standstills. And to give you an idea, the size of this circle and octagon is that there is a regulation golf course within the circle and octagon. There's no holes outside of it. It's all within regulation size golf course. The only way you can really see what you're looking at is from the air, from about 2,000 feet up. And then opposite that is a large hinge. A hinge is a circular earthwork, interior ditch, exterior wall, just like Stonehenge. There's the stones, but then there's a hinge on the outside of it. And my discovery that I discovered with L.A. Marzulli in his in search of the Nephilim, on the trail of the Nephilim, is that it's aligned to the May 1st Beltane sunrise to the east, and then to the west, standing outside of it, October 31st, again, it'll align for what it'd be Salmon. And these earthworks were made so, like, the circle with the octagon is equal to the area of a square earthwork adjacent to the hinge. And the circumference of the hinge at 3,700 feet, there's a square earthwork, each side 925 feet. So the circumference is equal to the perimeter of the square. But you needed to know pi, you needed to know trigonometry. The earthworks were laid out in a Pythagorean triangle. Okay, there we go, right there. So in that lower right, that's your hinge, and that's aligned to the May 1st Beltane sunrise, and then standing outside of that, looking to the west, you would be lined up to October 31st. And then opposite that is the square earthwork, each side 925 feet, 3,700 feet, sum total being the same as the circumference. Now, in old religions, squaring circles was the pinnacle of the geometer's art.
For sure.
And it is taking, see, the square you can add up with whole numbers, but a circle you have to know pi, and so it's a irrational number. And so the ancient thing, which goes all the way to alchemy, is this combination of circles and squares. And it's either making the areas the same or the perimeters the same. And so we have this old world religion, which I believe this is Nephilim architecture. This was built by the Amorites, one of the accounted giants in the Bible, who controlled Babylon from 2000 BC, 1600 BC. We know they knew trig. We knew that they knew pi. We knew they had Pythagorean's triangle. We know they had all that. And then all of that manifests within this earthwork here. So this is a Nephilim architecture here.
The henge is perfect. You know, I've discussed this site before on the show, and I'm still it takes my breath away. How extraordinary! You can see the math, you can see that, but again, like you said, kind of like Nazca, you can only see this from the air.
You can only see it, yes.
Yeah, and it just makes you wonder how. I mean, do you have? I know you've let your mind go on this quite a bit, but that is the question here. It's not so much the why. We can get to the why, but the how. The how is a pretty big question on how this was pulled off.
Let me throw one more thing at you. All right, the circle with the octagon and then the hinge.
Yep.
The hinge is larger. The ratio of the hinge to the circle is the same as the apogee and perigee moon. That's the large moon in the sky and the small moon in the sky. But that ratio is the same.
Wow.
How they figured that out, I don't know. But I'm just going to say, we're certainly not going to get into all the mathematics here, in a 5-minute discussion. But
right.
That just gives you an idea of just how deep this goes in mathematics.
It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And you can play the front 9 on it too as well. And I say that in jest, you know that. But you never know what you're walking over. And in this case, it's a golf course, right? And you're walking over a mound, something like this. But this kind of ancient history is everywhere. You just don't know what you're walking over, do you?
No, and these geometric earthworks are all throughout Ohio. All throughout Ohio, through Chillicothe and, even the Serpent Mound to some degree. Where when you're at the Serpent Mound, I mean, you can see it snaking around, but you really don't get the full effect of it until you look at it from the air. So they were all meant to see from the air.
I'm going to pull up one other image here really quick. Everybody just stay with me. And this will also sort of put this in perspective to everybody. I'm really glad that you picked this site. Okay, here we go. Now, I just find this incredible. And you can see the fairways too as well, by the way. I might as well just throw that in. And it gives you a little bit of perspective on the size of what we are talking about. But there you go. That's incredible.
Yeah. It's a circle in the octagon.
That is just incredible. This is a great photograph. The other part with this as we move on here. In a linear time scale, you mentioned some things a few moments ago. How old are we? Maybe to the extremes. How old are we actually talking here?
That particular site, there's a little bit of question on this. I had some insider information on the Hinge. The Ohio Historical Connection was doing a dig, and they had 800 BC came back on their carbon. But because it didn't fit their paradigm, they went with the 200 BC, which is where they like to be.
Right.
But there was a grad assistant that saw the results. It was 800 BC. And I said, yeah, that makes more sense.
Is it possible to be older?
I think
not with this site.
I think we could go 1000 BC on some of this, maybe a little bit older, but yeah, about 1000 BC. And over in England, we're going to have hinges. There's hinges all over the place in Ohio or in England. And then, the exact same hinges show up here. The skeletal remains, which what they call the Beaker people, are identical to what you're going to find in the Ohio Valley. And then, that belief is that they originated with these Amorites that, had their beginnings in ancient Babylon. And, what we know as them, but Hammurabi's code, the first laws, that was an Amorite. They were the ones that developed our modern 12-month calendar, the 12 houses of the astrology, that all came from them. So, I mean, it is a people that certainly has had an indelible mark upon, history, even today. And people don't know about them.
Are you suggesting? I almost said we. Are we suggesting? I'm not suggesting. This is way beyond my knowledge base. But are you suggesting a communication or migration? Obviously pre-Columbian, but of cultures that arrived here with a knowledge of henge building like this from Europe that predates everything else?
Well, yeah, I mean, they originated in Babylon, but they were the ones that built Stonehenge. They'd built many of the hinges over in the British Isles, noted for conical mounds with a circle or a ditch around them. The Grave Creek Mound in Moundsville, West Virginia. I mean, at one time that had a ditch that surrounded it. Marietta had a ditch. So a lot of the major, largest mounds in Ohio had the same ditch that you're going to find in England, then both associated with hinges. Hinges generally are aligned to a solar event. Mm-hmm. So it's either going to be a solstice or an equinox. And then what really makes Newark stand out is that it's aligned to May 1, and we can actually trace the origins of May 1, which we're going to associate mainly with the Celts, but it really had its origin in the ancient Levant. And then in Ireland, of course, we associate it with the Tuatha De Danann, and then their association both with, different giants and fairies and all sorts of things like that. So it all kind of goes together. But then when you have this glue of the use of pi, the use of square roots, the use of Pythagorean triangles, that we're dealing in trigonometry, and we're dealing in this, advanced mathematics, and we're also dealing with surveying. There at Newark, if you draw a line between the middle of the octagon and the middle of the hinge, the highest point of land there is Geller Hill. But if you go to that Geller Hill on top of that, it makes a perfect isosceles triangle, each side being about 7,000 feet. So, we're looking at different surveying skills as well. And we know that started out in ancient Babylon too, because they were buying land. And if you're buying land, you have to have surveying skills. And so now we've seen those skills being used over in Ohio and in of course with the earthworks. So yes, there was an ancient people from another land that came here and built the earthworks.
Now you mentioned L.A. Marzulli, who was amazing, by the way, and we love him. But his work, your work, with the both of you, when it comes to not only, I'm gonna just say the Bible, but I'm gonna say that loosely because that's not where I'm going with this. But it's giants, and I remember when I interviewed LA when he had gotten back from Catalina, right? Were you on Catalina with him for that?
No, I'm certainly aware of the photograph that he uncovered.
Right at the museum there. Okay, so as this started to reveal itself and your research into giants in America, I started to think that the mound builders may have been giants. I don't know. It's part of my question. But then if that is the case, why keep this part of our history from us? And do you think that there were giants buried in some of these mounds?
Yes. In great numbers, giants.
Right.
In great numbers. We're not talking a few, we're talking many.
Right.
So I wrote the Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants in North America, where I chronicled 900 accounts of them finding large skeletons. And we're going to go from over 7 foot to the largest in Ohio was, excuse me, about 9.5 foot. Nothing bigger than that, but 9.5 foot.
That's pretty
will
big.
Be the largest. But here's the thing about these skulls was that they had protruding brow ridge, they had a sloped forehead, they had a massive jaws, they had very large eye sockets. Of course, they were big boned and all that, but their skull types were so different than what we would consider modern men. These are more of an archaic type skulls. Sometimes they would have occipital buns in the back of their skulls that we would associate more with Neanderthal.
Mm-hmm.
They had double rows of teeth. So they had some anomalies with their skulls.
Wait. Double rows of teeth.
Yes.
One in front of the other.
Yes. Actually, just 2 rows of teeth going all the way around. And I think maybe about 40 or 50 accounts in the Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants, about 50 of those that were chronicled. And these were done by, doctors and different things like that. But what I propose is we're not talking about a race, this race or that race. What we're talking about is a completely different species of man. Just like they found not too long ago a very small people, Florensis or something, somewhere in Indonesia. Well, here we're talking about a completely different species of men. Now, this would certainly go with the biblical narrative, the Greek narrative, which has gone through so many things, is that these giants were the offspring of either angels, aliens, insert your whatever belief here, with men. So, but there was an introduction of a different gene pool that created a completely different species of man. And that's where I'm at. So we're not talking about white people or, we're talking about a different species of men.
For a minute, I was born in Chicago, raised in Indy. Okay. When I was a kid, we all, Okay. All right. I'm just going to make this really fast. Chicago has two great museums, the Field Museum and the Museum of Science and Industry. They have the Shed Aquarium and there's other stuff there. But the Field Museum, we are going on a field trip. I'm in the 4th grade to the Field Museum.
That's when we all went. That's when we all went to Chicago.
Yeah, man, it's just an amazing building, both of them. So anyway, and the Shed Aquarium. So my teacher hands us out brochures for the Field Museum. All right, and you got to get your parents to sign and all that stuff. But on the cover, Fritz, I'm not making this up. On the cover of the little pamphlet, right, the little brochure, is a giant skeleton, and it says giant human skeleton, right? And
Really?
I'm 9 or something, I'm a kid.
Yeah.
And all I want to do is get to the friggin' Field Museum and see this giant skeleton that is in like the foyer, and it's right there. So anyway, trip happens. Go to the Field Museum. I've got my brochure. I march in, man, and I go up to the first person I see. Where's the giant skeleton? We don't have a giant skeleton. Yeah, but it's right here. No, and here I am. Now I'm 61, and I have researched this for years. I can't find any mention about this, but I saw it with my own 2 eyes. And that to me says somebody came in and stopped this, or it's Mandela effect. I don't know what the deal is, but I know that I saw it. And there is so much of this in our history about skeletons being recovered and then being disappeared.
There was, the Smithsonian documents many large skeletons. I mean, on their own. Now, I know this Smithsonian they went to great lengths to come to Pig's Knuckle, Indiana, way in the boonies, down in the southern part of Indiana, we're in the hill region, where, you would have had to take in a train, then you would have had to get a horse and, a carriage, because you're going to take this skeleton back with you. And so, it was some effort to get these skeletons, but they did, because they knew what they had, and it had already been decided by the Smithsonian. Cyrus Thomas, he said, everything is Native American. Anything that goes against that paradigm is to be gathered up and destroyed. So it was an effort to change American history. It was all to be Native American, no matter what the evidence is. That's what it was going to be. Now, the Smithsonian on their own, especially in West Virginia around Charleston, mound after mound, just in the city of Charleston, 7.5 foot, very, very large, described as very large, very, very large. Well, we already know that they've got one 7'8". So when they're saying very, very, what were probably 8.5 foot. So now this is them documenting these skeletons, not just coming and getting them, but actually documenting them. And so, I mean, it's there. I mean, that evidence is there.
Do you think they still that they are in the possession of the Smithsonian, or do you think they've been destroyed?
It's hard to say, I mean, I've read that they were thrown into Potomac. The famous, is it Indiana Jones, where they show like the warehouse, and it's just in a box amongst millions of boxes. I mean, that very well could be as well.
I read something, maybe this was about 10 years ago, but I did read a copy of the newspaper article that said the Smithsonian loaded bones from Catalina Island onto a boat and then dumped them in Santa Monica Bay. I actually read that they threw him overboard.
Yeah, there was a man out there. His name was Glidden, I believe.
Yep.
And he was finding all sorts of stuff. And I believe it was whatever Glidden had dug up and photographed is what LA got that photo from. And then he had the wherewithal to have it photographically, scientifically taken apart where they could tell by the size of Glidden just how big this thing was. And it was well over 8 foot, 8.5 foot, something like that. And if you've ever seen the photo, you can tell the skull is different. It's not a modern looking skull. I mean, there's something, completely different about that.
If LA hadn't have done, see, this is the thing, and this is where we find ourselves. If LA hadn't been so persistent to get into the back rooms of that museum, that photograph would have never seen the light of day.
Oh, it was a miracle, an absolute miracle that he came across that. And then it was, as soon as he found it, the original was changed. So, yeah, I mean, they immediately obfuscated all that evidence. But, thank goodness, that, he had the wherewithal to do it,
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Now, you mentioned 1000 BC for the Americas here. Were the giants that we're referring to here, they were alive at 1000 BC here in North America?
They were here earlier than that. They were probably here more around 2000 BC. And we know that because in Isle Royale up in Michigan on Lake Superior are copper mines. And the amount of copper that was removed out of those mines is 500,000 tons. And we have no account. I mean, of that, a fraction of 1% we could probably come up with. That's found in surface finds, bracelets, some other things. But there's 500,000 tons of copper that is missing. Now, this copper at Isle Royale is 99.9% pure. The only impurity is a little bit of silver in it. Means you pull it out of the ground, it's ready to go. It's ready to melt. Now, in 2000 BC, we're dealing with the Middle Bronze Age. So what do you need? You need copper and you need tin. Now it's interesting that one of the larger tin mines is just a little southwest of Stonehenge. And then one of the accounted giants in the Bible called the Anak, actually another name for them is 10. It's a reference to the metal 10. And so we can kind of tie the giants into this mining operations. Now, in 2000 BC, we're not leaving anything. They're coming here, they're getting this copper, and then it's going back to England. It's going back to the Levant. It's arming the Egyptian army. It's arming the Hittite armies. It's arming the ancient Hebrew armies. This is about the time, before Abraham and kind of that era right there. So here we have all this copper. Now, one scientist said to mine this copper out of Isle Royale, it would have taken 10,000 men 1,000 years to get all that copper out.
500,000 is a big number.
It's a lot.
That's a big number. That's a big number. I have a 1 ounce copper coin here. Right. I'll just, pop this up. That's how much, and this is pure, right? How much of this was mined? That's a big number. So that would also suggest a commercial trade route.
Absolutely. That they were coming here for that copper. There's no other reason that there would have that much copper that's missing. And I don't know that you're going to have scientists that are going to disagree with you, but it's something they just don't want to talk about. And that's what we do. That's what we do in academia these days. When it's something that is against your paradigm, you just don't talk about it. I mean, that's modern archaeology. I mean,
Yeah, you stay in the safe zone. Well, it's a tough funding environment, isn't it?
well,
Just being honest.
Publish or perish, but you're not going to go
Yeah.
against the mainstream. You're not going to be that guy that's going to say, because they will get rid of you. But I mean, we are basically in the dark ages of history in America, because there's so much that has been covered up, not talked about. So to think that you go to a university and it's this higher learning and, uncovering new truths, there's nothing could be further than the truth. You're just lockstep, Pravda. You're saying the government line, and that's it. And so it's people like me and Marzulli and other researchers are trying to bring this alternative history, to light, that people know that, wow, you have an incredible history. With the earthworks, you're not going to find anywhere else of the pi and trigonometry and all the other things that was required in their construction. But it's there, and you can't deny mathematics. You can't deny the lengths of something, and to say that to get this, you had to know the circumference of a circle. So you had to know pi r squared, and extrapolate that into the total of a square earthwork, and then the religion behind that, of the circle and the square, and what that meant, of that the circle or the square was the earth, and the circle was this other reality. And so we're dealing in ancient religions and how that plays off, and just the sacred geometry we find within the earthworks of what they were making.
Why does academia choose to struggle, okay, with a dogma and belief system that these earthworks and the engineering, the astronomy, and the other stuff that is behind it, the mathematics, of course, was all done with deer skin and sticks, right? And they would rather struggle with that and use that explanation than get closer to the truth. And we can handle the truth. Why do they want to continue to push this dogma?
Well, now here's something interesting. There has been a renaissance in the academic world. Now, the fact that the Newark Earthworks were laid out in a big Pythagorean triangle, I was attacked vehemently 7 years ago, when this came out. They just denied it, even though it's there. You can see it. It's like, no, it's a 3, 4, 5 triangle. Well, the new revisionists, now they're saying, is that there was what I think Brad Lepper, the head of the Ohio Historical Connection, says. There was a Michelangelo, a Native American Michelangelo. And this one guy built all these geometric earthworks in the Ohio Valley, even though there's a 500-year difference in their construction. And so they say now there's another earthwork in Winchester, Indiana. It's a rectangular earthwork. Winchester, Indiana is just a little north of Indianapolis. And that was built, this rectangular or earthwork was built using 2 Pythagorean triangles. So now their line is, well, if you don't believe that Native Americans had the Pythagorean triangle, that in itself is racist. And now the explanation is that there's the Michelangelo of Native Americans. And he figured out Pythagorean's triangle, and now he built these geometric earthworks. So that's the new line. So now not to believe in the Pythagorean triangle is racist. So you can go with that wherever you want.
Yeah.
I mean,
Wow.
Why would
I remember hearing about that, and again, I'm not going to suggest or take away anything from any culture before me. Smart, and that absolutely smarter than we give them credit for. But at the same time, academia will say, but they didn't have certain tools. They didn't have metallurgy. They didn't have the wheel. They didn't have this. They didn't have that. And they were just ingenious with the tools that they did have, like blades of grass and chicken bones. And it's like they want to have it. They want to have it both ways and stay in the safe zone because it's uncomfortable to talk about. And that it's just frustrating to me, Fritz.
Well, here would be an example. Let's say you're in Germany. You're in southern Germany, and you come across a Roman type building. Now, to the archaeologists, you would look at that and you go, "That's a Roman building." But an archaeologist, North American archaeologist, would say, "No, that's German." We're like, "Well, Germans didn't build things like this." "Well, it's in Germany." "What do you mean? You don't think Germans were smart enough to build a Roman type building?" Like,
Bingo.
no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they didn't build Roman type buildings. That's why they're Roman. Then they would say, "You're a racist by not believing that those Germans were building Roman type buildings." That's racist. So see, that's their argument.
We're going to take a break here in just a second. I want to set up for our return. And since you are a media major, you know exactly what I just said. I've done a lot of shows, and one of the things that I hear about from researchers that have gone out to the mound sites and different indigenous sites, and I've visited some myself, is a preponderance of paranormal, supernatural, not only activity, but observations. And I would even take it a step further and suggest maybe something otherworldly too, not of this earth. Now, is that something that is possible? One, and two, is it because of the purpose of the site, or is it geographical?
Purpose, probably. Purpose.
The spiritual side.
Yeah, they were manifesting spirits.
Right.
Burial mounds. Burial mounds were portals that connected the living with the dead. See, they're ancestral. They were into ancestral worship.
Exactly.
So a lot of these mounds would have, it's a charnel house. So the dead are brought into this house. At some period, they burn it. They burn it down. And now you have a layer of ash. So now you put another layer of earth, another charnel house goes up. Slowly, this mound keeps getting bigger and bigger. So in the end, you might have, not all mounds, some, ash layer after ash layer. So you're dealing with hundreds, maybe 1,000 burials.
Souls.
Yes. So this would be a place where you would come to worship to your ancestors for prosperity and, what people worship for. And then in the book of Enoch, it says of the giant race, it says, your spirits will be earthbound. So we know that the giant race, it's an earthbound entity. And we know that also from burial goods within the mounds that they're pretty much lacking. So you don't have that. Burial goods are for your journey to the other life, whether it be the Milky Way or, whatever, that religion dictates. But we really don't find that in the burial mounds. We find very, very few artifacts, but nothing like Egypt or anything like that. So it's completely void. And why? Because those spirits are not going anywhere. They're right here.
Let's take our break. Our guest tonight, Fritz Zimmerman. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. We're talking about the dark side of ancient America. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Gobekli Tepe. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. Today we're headed to Bolivia, Tiwanaku, Peru, and of course, Pumapunku. Brian, exciting. Thank you so much for everything, my friend.
Always an honor. Right behind us is the sacred river of the Inca that goes past Machu Picchu. So we're going to be driving up to its source at 15,000 feet above sea level and then down to Lake Titicaca.
So today we hit 15,000 feet.
Yes.
Crazy. And you can do it with us. All you have to do is go to hiddenincatours.com. Simple. We've got 2 tours coming up next year, one in June for the summer solstice, right? And then another one right here in November. So hiddenincatours.com. Come and hang out with Brian and I and his amazing team.
Right on.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Fritz Zimmerman is with us. Tonight, we're talking about the dark side of ancient America. And I've got to say, I'm getting my education on tonight. That's right. And this is how you get your diploma. Just hang out on the show. get your learn on. Now, Fritz, 400 sites visited, almost 100 photographed and documented. There has to be an enormous amount of crazy experiences. And you know what I mean? Now, can you share some of that with us? I am sure that stuff has happened. And can you kind of like describe what may go on?
You know, a lot of times, you know, I went to all these sites. I was by myself, you know, I was alone. And to start out, I mean, I really wasn't looking at a paranormal, you know, bent on anything. You know, I'm photographing sites, you know, I'm doing the travel guide, you know, trying to get as many sites done in a day. But in those travels, you know, at Fort Hill, I see a shadow person for the first time. I am across the river from Point Pleasant, West Virginia,
Okay.
where the Mothman is.
Okay.
And there's a disembodied voice that says, in this high, creepy voice, it says, "Nice evening, isn't it?" I mean, just as close as somebody standing a foot away from me. And I end up having some sort of entity spends the day with me. I'm going down the Kanawha River. Now, the Kanawha River, the Shawnee Indians, they called it the River of Evil Spirits. Shawnee Indians, Native Americans would not live in West Virginia. It was haunted. They never lived there. And that's all Ladina. That's all Nephilim, everything in West Virginia. It's just the craziest place in the world. But the Native Americans wouldn't live there. They said it was haunted. They called the Kanawha River the River of Evil Spirits. They called the Ohio River the River of Blood. They wouldn't live in northern Kentucky. And no Indian settlements in northern Kentucky. They didn't live there. They would fight. There were settlers. Daniel Boone was there in northern Kentucky, and you know he had his run-ins. But they would do that, but they wouldn't live there. So throughout the years, I'm running into entities and disembodied voices and shadow people. And through the years, people start contacting me, and they're sharing their paranormal experiences at these earthworks. You know, somebody else was at Fort Hill. They saw a shadow person in the same place I saw it.
What's your definition of a shadow person?
Well, it's a black mass. I mean, so shadow is probably a good explanation or description of it, but you can't see through it. It's just blackness. This thing was probably 8 foot. It was kind of weird. It was on the outside of the earthwork. Now, in my new recent investigations around, we're finding that they're not in the inside of the earthworks. They're on the outside. I think that inside is sacred ground. So they're on these perimeters of these earthworks. But at Fort Hill, that same place, there was a man who lived around there. He's a Marine vet, him and his wife. They see, I'm going to call it a cryptid, but if you can imagine a torso, I mean, cut off at about mid-rib, and this thing walking backwards down the road. And this, you know, Army vet sees it. They have somebody draw it, what it looks like. It's in ancient America, the dark side. So there's different people seeing things, different mound sites of, you know, shadow people hearing noises. It's always by mounds, and they're seeing different things. They're seeing cryptids. Over in Mansfield, Ohio, somebody's saw these, I don't know, like furry things, you know, but there was like 50 of them that surrounded his van. And another over at Piketon, Ohio, this lizard entity with like its arms are like shovels. And that guy had a drawing made of it, which was really nice because, they're contacting me. So not only giving me a good description, but, they had taken the time to have somebody, draw what they had witnessed. So
Wait, shovel like shaped like or like webbing between fingers.
no, just like shovels. So if imagine like a canoe paddle, that's what the arms of this thing look like. But it had sharp teeth. It was gray. You could see like the veins through this gray skin. So it's this weird looking entity. And this is what this guy described seeing it. So we're seeing cryptids. And then you have the UFO aspect to this as well. There was a guy that contacted me that there was 2 balls of light that were flying around the serpent mound that he witnessed. And I think
I've heard, let's stay on Serpent Mound for a second if we can. I have interviewed many people and private conversations too that have all of them have contact experiences at Serpent Mound. That there is a definite ET connection there.
yes, and I ran into that as well with a possible abduction after going to a mound site, seeing a UFO. The following night on the way home, I was with another author. We were up at a conference in Burlington, Wisconsin. Stanton Friedman was there. Some guy named Schmidt who's written these books on
Don Schmidt. Yeah, Don Schmidt.
Yeah, Don. Yeah, Don. He was up there. And we were with this group, and I had gone earlier that day because the person who was running the conference thought there were burial mounds up there in these woods. So I had taken a group up there and confirmed that, yeah, they were burial mounds. And then she had a Vortex Woods tour or something, going on that night. And I wasn't doing anything, so I went. It was interesting. There was a guy from the Milwaukee Herald, I think it was, a reporter. He was there, and there was this light that came across the sky, and it was like a orange color. And it come racing across the sky, and it got right to where we were, and it stopped. And it's like a plasma. So it's not like a star where there's light coming out of it. Like almost like a television or something up there, but it's this plasma, and it's like oscillating red and orange. And it was up there for, I don't know, 20 seconds or so, and then it slowly faded away. Then poof. The blackness of, southern
faded to black. It faded to black. I had to do that. I had to say it. I had to do it. I couldn't avoid the fade to black reference.
Yeah, but then after that, another one came across and did the exact same thing.
What did the Miami Herald, the Milwaukee Herald? What was it? He, the reporter.
Yeah,
what did they have to say?
Yeah, some young guy. I don't know, probably in his late 20s, early 30s. Yeah, he was up there covering his phone because she had her Vortex Woods tour and this and that. And I was told you got to go because there's all this paranormal activity that's going to happen, and this and that. All right, so I went. So I mean, nobody expected that. I think I saw that article for maybe a second, and I have subsequently looked for that to see what that guy wrote about that night. But I was standing there right next to him, and he's the one that had a camera. I think the photograph I had is actually from him, that he photographed this thing. And so it was good that, he was there to document it. But the following night we left, I was with another author from Fort Wayne, and him and I had ridden up to Wisconsin. Excuse me. But on the way home, we were wrapped around Chicago. We got around Valparaiso, Indiana, and we just needed to drop south, hit I-30. I-30 goes clear across the country. But we're going to hit I-30 and then a couple hours to Fort Wayne, back. And got on road. I think it was on 49. And there was a sign that said US 30, 7 miles. Okay, good. And the next thing I remember is we're driving, very rural, black sky. We go by a coal burning plant.
You're in Detroit.
I'm just east of Chicago.
No, it was a joke. It was a joke. Get it? You were on 30, headed to Fort Wayne. Next thing you know, you're in Detroit. Okay, but continue.
So we're rural, go by this thing, and it's like, all right, it was off. So we're in the truck, and I look, and I said, Rick, your clock all right? And he goes, what do you mean? I go, look, I said, it's 2 a.m. I said, I just said I would be home at 2 a.m. We were only a couple miles from 30, and I was about 2 hours from home. Now we look at our phones, like, no, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, what happened to 2 hours? So we drive and we hit a road, 114. I know where 114 goes. That'll take you south of Fort Wayne. I said, well, how the heck did we get down to 114 and not hit 30? So we turned around, went back, headed back north. Go back by the coal plant. Still can't figure out where 2 hours is gone. And about another 5-6 miles, past the coal plant, there's 30. Not only 30, but the Porter County Airport was right there. So, that sea of blue lights, when an airport. And, you are a major exchange like that. Of course, it's lit up like a Christmas tree. And I'm like, Rick, there's no way we drove by this. We're on the same road. How could we drive by this? It's an overpass we had to go over. How did that happen? Well, he can't figure it out. I can't figure it out. 2 hours have gone by. We're north of 30. Now we're 12, 13 miles south of 30. We're on the same road. And 2 hours have gone by. So what happened?
What do you think happened?
I don't know. I just know we were here and then we were there. And I have somebody that's, with me. And I'm, we're asking each other questions the whole way. It's like, did you see 30? No, we never hit 30. And it was like a blink, 7 miles to 30. And I know from looking at maps after that there were 2 exchanges. One was for Valpo University and one was for the town of Valpo. We never passed either one of those. So right after that 7 miles where we popped, about 12 miles south, and 2 hours went by. And nothing, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't like the car was on the side of the road or anything. We were going down the road.
Right. You seem very pragmatic. And so when something like that happens with somebody that thinks like you do, how do you resolve it? You've got to resolve it somehow. You got to keep your sanity.
What are your options? What's your possible explanation? There's not a whole lot of places to go. I can tell you that there were UFOs the night before.
Yeah, I know. I see. I think there's a hidden meaning to the word Hoosier. That's what I think. I don't know what it is. So I'll give you an example of Indiana. Very, very quick. But I want your reaction to this. I'm 18 years old. I moved out of the house and I'm living in Irvington in downtown Indy, my first apartment. And I'm out driving in my car, which is a Toyota Corolla. This is 1981, 82. And I'm in my neighborhood that I grew up in, Warren Central High School, right there. And I'm heading up this road. I am literally a mile from my parents' house on a road that I've ridden on in my neighborhood hundreds and hundreds of times. I know every tree. I know everything. And I drive past this house for rent. And I see the for rent sign on the street. And I look at the house. It's a little white house, but it had an in-ground pool in the front yard. And I hit the brakes, man. Turn around. What? Little house for rent, in-ground pool. It's summer. This is great. So I walk onto the property and I look to my left and there's a graveyard, like a family plot, like 8 gravestones on the other side of a chain link fence in the trees. I see that and I don't give a shit. There's an in-ground pool, right? And so I look in the windows and I'm like, I'm going to rent this place. So I jump in my car. I drive back to my neighborhood where my parents live, Heather Hills, it's called. Pick up a couple of my closest friends, telling them, I can show you this house. We're going to rent it. Okay, so we drive a mile. I go back. The house is gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's gone. It's gone. It's not there. And my friends thought that I was lying. Now, I am confused. Now, I have told this story. The friends that were with me in the car, they never saw the house. They know about me picking them up and taking them over there. That house disappeared. I looked in the window, Fritz. Now, I don't know. What do I do with that? What are my options? And I have spent 40 years pondering that. And I still don't have an explanation. And I have gone back and looked for that house many times. It's gone. Yep. And there's only 2. It's a cornfield, right? That's it. There's no streets out there. It was crazy. So what do you do with that? Is it a vortex like you? Did you drive through some Twilight Zone moment? I don't know. But this stuff, no matter what somebody wants to say, it doesn't change your experience, does it? No, it doesn't.
Now, people have suggested to me that I do some sort of regressive,
Sure.
Hypnosis.
Are you open to it?
At first I was not, but I think I would, because I would just like to know. Now, I can tell you this, that after this incident, whenever I would go through an airport, my jaw would light up. There's something metal in my jaw. But it would always light up at the airport. Bang, there it is. There's a light. And like, what could that be? I don't know. I don't know what it is. But it was afterwards that all of a sudden I had metal that was showing up in my mouth that I didn't have before. So, I mean, that's just like another layer of the mystery. And does that mean, I have a probe or something in there? I don't know. But it's
but when we're talking about the possibility of sacred land being under your feet, I was talking about that earlier. No matter where you walk, right? You're walking over something that was there before us. It doesn't matter. Any spot in the world. And could this be, there's something residual that is left over? You mentioned ash, layers, right? Souls stacked up. There's that. And then with indigenous cultures, there's always a belief of good and evil. And I don't know if it's angels and demons, but certainly yin and yang and black and white and positive and negative. These are real aspects of life. Does this ever come into your reasoning of not only these sites but the phenomena itself?
Yeah, there's an energy. There's an energy at different mound earthwork sites. I mean, some there is, some there isn't, and some it's definitely noticeable. Now, I'm not saying I'm a psychic or a medium or anything like that, but I don't even think you need to have that to be able to perceive this energy. I've been with people and they weren't psychics, and they would mention to me, it's like, there's like energy field or something there. And I go, did you notice that? Yeah, I did. And I go, all right, I have too. And I'm not going to elaborate on it, but there's an energy. So I think these sites were meant to be charged. Now, are this charged for the dead, charged for good, charged for evil? We've already discussed the Newark Earthworks. You can't see them or perceive them from the ground. They were meant from somebody in the air. Well, is that the UFOs? Is there some sort of tie between these aliens and these ancient people? Is this who they were building these geometric earthworks? And the importance of mathematics, the importance of them being perfect, the importance of the circles and the squares being equal, because the common man is not going to see it, never have any idea about that. Archaeologists had no idea about it. So there's a whole different dimension going on within the earthworks. And it's just hard to wrap your head around it, except for now, in my latest research, now I'm finding that there's a ton of people that are having all sorts of paranormal activity in the outdoor realm, not the indoor realm, because 99.9% of any paranormal show, they're indoors. They're in a haunted house or this or that. So this idea of haunted outdoors is new, and which you got a glimpse of with the Mystery House. How does that happen? Some sort of ripple in time, some sort of break in the fabric. I mean, how lucky are you that you didn't get sucked into it and just disappeared forever?
Right. And it's perplexing, but I mean, for me personally, because I went through it, but there's another side to this, in that every culture since the dawn of man has got the same stories, right? This isn't anything new. I think that science and physics is getting closer to possible explanations for this. I don't know if it comes down to math or comes down to consciousness, or if it's chemistry or what it may be. But I think that this is a conversation that has been had for thousands of years, and I don't, it's the same answer, isn't it, from everybody? Well, what was it? I don't know. Right? It's the same thing over and over again. I don't know. I can't explain it. I saw it out here in California. We have two crazy sites that are next to each other. And one is Joshua Tree. And you can go to Joshua Tree just about any night of the week, and you are guaranteed to see something crazy. Guaranteed. Whether it's an orb, a ball of light going across the desert. I've been out there with hundreds of people. I've seen it, videotape, witness, crazy. And then you have to step back and say, well, the cultures out here have been talking about this forever. Is it spiritual or is it ET? Is it both? I don't know. But and then there's Blythe, California. Are you familiar with the Blythe petroglyphs, like Nazca? Have you seen those?
No.
Here, I'll show you a picture. This is one of them, and they are huge. That's Blythe. That's Blythe, California. And
wow,
they're
that's
yeah,
wow.
and what's crazy about this, these are out in the desert near Blythe on the Arizona-California border, right? There's many of them, and they're huge. They were undiscovered, Fritz, until a pilot in the 1950s with his wife ran out of gas in his plane. Yeah. So he's landing his plane, his engine stopped, and he's looking for a safe place to land, and he looks out the window and sees that. Right? So he lands his plane. Yeah. He lands his plane. He's talking to his wife, and they walk for miles and miles through the desert and make it to something, make it to a phone, call the police to tell them they crash landed their airplane out in the desert. And he's talking he's like, hey man, we saw some stuff out there in the desert. What? And that's how they were discovered in the 1950s. And they still don't know who did them or how old they are. Yeah.
Well, do you know there are, except for the Ohio Valley.
Well, but let me get back to your point. The reason why I showed only seen from the sky, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like Nazca, what's the purpose of that? If you can't see it from the ground, the locals out there didn't know, right? It was a plane that flew over quite by accident that made the discovery.
Now, where is that in the proximity of the state?
On the Arizona. Okay, so the 10 freeway that goes between LA and Phoenix. Okay, the 10 west, it goes through Texas, right? Goes to Florida. Anyway, so the 10,
all right.
Yeah, east-west. So off of the 10 freeway on the Arizona border with California. That's Blythe. And that's where these are. They're called the Blythe petroglyphs.
Wow.
Yeah, you can look them up. Look them up. They're amazing.
That's a first.
But nobody knows. Nobody knows. I mean, I've heard guesses. There's a little bit of research into this, but the roughest dating is 2,500 to 3,000 years old. But all of the local Indians out here, nobody has laid claim.
No.
Now,
in California, from San Francisco down to Los Angeles, Malibu area, there's probably 50 accounts of large skeletons. And like the Burton Mound, which is Santa Barbara, there was a large mound called the Burton Mound there in that harbor. They described them as spy Neanderthal. So they actually take pictures of spy Neanderthal, which, wasn't exactly the skull they were getting, but they were saying that, scientists were coming in because the skeletons were more akin to Neanderthal than anything modern. But 50 accounts of giant skeletons through that area right there. And there's really no explanation for that, except I know around Mount Shasta, there's all sorts of craziness, stone circles, some different things, people being lost. And I'm never been to California, so I'm not familiar just how far north Shasta is, but it seemed to be in that wheelhouse.
Yeah, Shasta's on the Oregon border.
Okay, that's way up there then.
Way from my house, it's probably 12-hour drive.
Okay, that's
Yeah, without traffic, it's a schlep for sure. 10 hours. Now,
wow.
okay, I don't want to get too controversial, but the question is an honest one, and I've certainly put this to L.A. Marzulli. And L.A., if you're listening, I love you, brother. You owe me a phone call. Are we talking about the Nephilim?
Yes.
And we are.
Yes.
And what? Okay, let's stay. I'm glad you said that because I want to learn what makes you come to that conclusion. Is it the Bible or something else?
Well, I think, Nephilim really is a reference to giants. Genesis 6:4. There were Nephilim in those days and also after that. There were giants in those days and also after that. So it's a reference to the giants. But I think when you're talking Nephilim is what we're talking about, is this origin of that they were the product of angels mating with women.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I talked to LA not too long ago, and I was talking about, the different species theory that just like, we're talking species. And I said, doesn't the Bible corroborate that if it's saying that the giants were actually a hybrid race? And it's like, yeah, that would be more the case. And, I've talked to different UFO groups, and that's your Anunnaki. They believe in Anunnaki that the giants were actually women and aliens. So it's like, well, whether it's biblical or Anunnaki, it's like, insert your belief here, but we're all talking about the same thing.
The problem, I like the Anunnaki theory, and the reason why. Now, there are different segments and different genres and different groups that have their own version of the Anunnaki interpretation and story. That's fine. But what attracts me to the Anunnaki story isn't necessarily the Anunnaki story. It's science and their issues with modern man. Okay, the missing link and chromosome pairs and our age of being 200,000 years and so forth. Some of that lines up with the Anunnaki myth, right? Okay, so I'm okay with that. Science is supporting. I don't want to have to have a belief in something. I want something to support it, right? And so I think that science does support some of that. When we get into something that is 3,000 years ago, like you were saying, 1000 BC, we have stuff that supports that too as well, and that's the mound builders and the own historical accounts and records of what has been seen here in North America when it comes to skeletons. And that's the part for me that I don't know if the Bible is right, if the books of the Bible are, or is the Bible science fiction that is turning out to be true? I don't know. But the evidence is just like piling up around us, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't think there's any camp that's, absolutely correct and another one that's not correct. I think whether you're Anunnaki or Nephilim, Amorites, which I believe in, I think, there's a foothold of truth in all of it. So I don't think I would have a hard time, arguing with anybody's theory, whether it be the Anunnaki or Nephilim or, whatever it is.
What about the watch? How do the Watchers play into this?
Well, now the Watchers is going to be lending itself more to those fallen angels.
Right.
Because, see, the Watchers taught the giants the secrets. They were not supposed to. They taught them the course of the sun. Well, we see that in the earthworks. They taught them the course of the moon. We see that in the earthworks. So the Watchers had the secrets, and they taught these giants these secrets. And we find that manifesting in the lunar tables, solar tables, mathematics, all of this stuff that the Watchers taught the giants, which would be the Amorites. Of course, they're, one of the accounted giants in the Bible. And then, there are real people, though, which makes that exciting.
I'm not familiar with the Amorites.
Yeah, the Amorites were a real people. They controlled Babylon from 2000 BC to 1600 BC. Noted for their advanced mathematics, noted for their surveying skills. Hammurabi, the first actual codex of laws, he was an Amorite. And I had mentioned earlier the astrology and our calendars and all that. That all comes from the Amorites, and so much more relevant than anyone has ever really led to believe, because they're biblical people. So that immediately will take academia away from that pursuit, even though they were a real people. But they're mentioned numerous times in the Bible as one of the accounted giant tribes.
What region of the Mediterranean were they living?
Well, now their dolmens, stone circles, and all of that is found on the east side of the Jordan River.
Okay.
So even if you look at something like a book like Archaeology of the Bible, they'll talk about dolmens. They'll have stone circles. There'll be stone burial mound with a circle around it. Same as we're going to find in England, same as we're going to find in Ohio. Now, these are the same people, but, that's also them in Babylon, in the city of Ur, where Abraham came from. The root word of Jerusalem is Jerusalem. Ur means sun, or sun city. So we do find their evidence, around the ancient Levant. And then there, people have said stone circles, that there have been things similar to Stonehenge over there in the biblical lands. And, you have something like Jacob's pillar, where Jacob erects this pillar and he pours oil on it. And this is insight into the megalithic era, where you go to England and you see these stone pillars sticking out of the ground. And archaeologists say, well, we have no idea what those were. And it's like, read the Bible. The Bible's all about megalithic stone worship. Make me a altar of stone, let no craftsman touch it, lest he ruin it. This is how you make an altar to God. You make it out of stone. Let no craftsman touch it, lest he ruin it. That's the true religion. That's a true religion in the Bible. And you can believe it.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. What's your take on the Bible? Whether I don't know if you go to church on Sunday or Saturday, or if you're religious, I don't know. I don't know these things. But the Bible itself as a book, both the Old and New Testament, let's just slap them together and just call that the Bible. Is that historical record, or is it something else?
The greatest historical record that is so underutilized. Like I was saying, to learn about the megalithic era, read about Jacob, read about the stone circles, read about 12 stones in a circle. What is that? That's a calendar. That's what the ancient religion, that's the Old Testament religion. It would be more godly to have a pillar of stone in your front lawn. And that would be far more godly than to go to a church with a gold goblet at the front of the church. Because if Jesus Christ ever came into a modern church, he would lose it. He would absolutely lose it.
I think it was last night. Maybe it was the night before. The shows run together for me, Fritz, as you can imagine. But I had said, I think it was last night anyway, that if I could go back in time and we've all had that romantic thought, right? What if? What would you do? What would you do? Right? Would you chase down the girl that got away from you in high school? Would you go fix that, or would you do something else? So many people bring up the pyramids. I would like to see how the pyramids were built. I think that might be, but my number two, not my number one, but my number two, I'd want to meet Jesus. And I wouldn't ask him. I don't know if I would ask him religious stuff. I would just want to just talk and get a read on him. I would want to meet Jesus. I want to meet Jesus.
Yes. Traveling to Babylon, Egypt. I mean, to the Ohio Valley to see that to see these large skeletons walking around, and what's going on at the earthworks and this and that.
I bring this up because I mentioned the Bible about being a historical record. I remember L.A. Marzulli said to me once, and I agree, that the Bible, man, if you read it just as a book, it's the best science fiction ever written. So, and he's right in that there's some pretty crazy stuff in there. And do we take it as metaphor, or do we take it literally? Like the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, or Ezekiel's wheel, and Moses and the parting of the sea, or the light in the sky guiding him through the desert for, what was it, 40 days, 40 years, whatever it was. See, I'm not a biblical scholar, but that reads like science fiction to me. So what do we do? Do we interpret as metaphor and get a message from it, or do we take it literally?
I think, some of the stories in the Bible were borrowed from the Babylonians of Enki and the floods and, some different things. But, the more some of these stories, like the Exodus, which I believe were the Amorites, who were the Hyksos, and the Jews were with them. The Amorites and the Jews were together. They both were Semitic people. Both spoke the same language. But, they talk about, the Exodus and, the big Cecil B. DeMille and the sea parts. Well, that wasn't it, but there was an earthquake or something that they've identified around there. And you know how when there's a tidal wave, how it sucks all the water out? And they're saying, well, yeah, that could have happened. As they were coming through, that water could have been sucked out. And it's like, well, I mean, do you look at it with this eye of this is a fairy tale, or is there evidence there that some of this stuff really did happen? That, of course, it's been, added to and made more of a grander tale than maybe what it was. Mm-hmm. But is that kernel of truth in there?
Well, so everybody's got the same story.
And I'm an Old Testament person, not so much a New. But no, I grasp onto all that. And it's just what a great historical book this is. What great insight into an era when there really was no written word, but it's there. And so there is a lot to be garnered from that book, opposed to thinking it's just some fanciful tale. No, there's a lot in there. Like I mentioned, talking about the megalithic era and kind of getting some insight of what a stone pillar of, circles of stone. It's the only real record we have of this mysterious, these mysterious stones that were left all over the world.
You know what messed it up for me was Gobekli Tepe. And I'll tell you why. When you look at Gilgamesh and you look at, Edfu in Egypt and the Builder's text, and the stories of, Plato and Plato's Atlantis and Atlantis. And then, of course, you have Noah and you have the flood stories in the Bible. But those, all of those are timed at the same moment that Gobekli Tepe was deliberately buried, a stone's throw from the birthplace of Abraham, by the way, right? And some other biblical and Sumerian cities that were supposed to have been myth that are, now they're uncovering those cities. And
Yes.
so Gobekli Tepe, why was it deliberately buried at 10,500 BC? Unless there was some type of cataclysmic event that is represented in just about every culture in the world. So yeah, it seems like it's not a biblical artifact, but it's damn close, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, this is the mystery, the great mystery. And there's so many, the Greeks, somewhat the Romans, but you take the Greeks in the Bible, there's a lot of parallels there. They talk of the same. They talk about giants. They talk about, flood myths. They, a lot of the same stories. Of course, the Babylonians had the same thing, which the Bible borrowed heavily from. And, it just kind of begs of like, well, what is that true religion? What is that true God? I mean, is the Babylonian God the same as the Hebrew God? And, how does that manifest into modern religions?
And Osiris and Zeus and Thor, right? Yeah. Now, is it possible? I don't know. I'm assuming it would have to be. Is it possible to study the metallurgy of the Lake Superior copper and the spear points from the Mediterranean and see where that copper originated from?
They've done it and they have found it. They have found Great Lakes copper in Egypt. And they've also found in mummies, what is it? Cocaine?
Yeah.
They found cocaine, and there's some, what is it? Something they were smoking.
Tobacco, probably.
Yeah, I think it was tobacco. And they have found that in mummies. And that shows there's commerce, that things were going over. I'd mentioned earlier that Great Lakes copper was making weapons, bronze weapons for the Egyptians. And there was probably the tobacco and cocaine and some of that other was making it over there as well. But see, now that is diffusionism, and that is not accepted by academia.
Right.
And if it's not accepted, then it doesn't exist.
I have to, I'll divert this to the audience. And if anybody wants to look this up overnight, send me an email. That'd be great. I had read that the tin used in the copper to make the bronze instruments for ancient Egypt, chisels, spear point, all that stuff, came from Northern Europe, like Poland. How was that trade route set up 4,000 years ago? At the start of the Bronze Age. When but nobody wants to talk about that. But that was one of the biggest tin sources in the world at that time.
Oh, sure. Tin, the amber trade up around the Baltic, not that far from Poland, moving over into the Baltic. They were everywhere. They had people, and you might see a guy that had piece of metal. Where'd you get that? Oh, it's over here. Is it a lot of it? Yeah, it's just laying around. Yeah, it's, surface finds. These people are out making money. Why did they come here? Well, why did the Dutch come over here? For furs. If it wasn't for furs, they wouldn't have bothered. You're not going to go to Virginia or, northern, the Northeast. I mean, it's, the worst soil ever.
Good tobacco, though. Good tobacco. Good tobacco.
Well, you got to go south for that. But, we didn't really start south. We started a little bit north than that. Well, of course, Jamestown is Virginia. But, they scratching out a limit. But really, the first money to be made was furs. That's what the Dutch were coming over here. And they were, it was the fur trade, but it was money. And without making that money, none of it ever happens. I mean, granted, we say everybody's coming over. The Pilgrims were religiously oppressed, even though they were the most oppressive religious people that were ever on the continent. But it was the furs. It was that money. That's the same money to come here to get the copper. We have lead mines through Pennsylvania that are thousands of years old, and lead was used to lower the boiling point, I think, of different metals like copper. They would add lead to it. Not a lot, but it was used. But I mean, try to explain why is there several, relatively large lead mines up around Pennsylvania. Native Americans were not using lead for anything.
Yeah, I agree with you. Before I let you go, the Lake Superior copper question is that's a really, 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 really big deal. And if that is the case, which it is the case, we just don't know where it went to, then that would suggest a large transoceanic logistic layout. That's it. There was another option, and that tips over history completely. And I don't know if that will ever be taught in school. I don't care what the proof is.
And why isn't it being taught in school? It's the great mystery. It's like, what happened to all this copper? And see, once you kick that door down, now you kick other doors to say, yeah, Amorites could have came over here. And why are these geometric earthworks here? And why are they using all this advanced mathematics? And what was the point? And yeah, you can believe in, the Michelangelo Native Americans, but, the Dakota Sioux were in the Ohio Valley. They were the Hopewell mound builders. There is a Native American presence with the Dakota Sioux. I'm not saying that they were completely void of the building of these geometric earthworks. They were around. These Amorites didn't come here and just be on their own. They did ally themselves. We know that the Dakota Sioux were here 2000 BC. They're with the shell mound culture down around the Ohio River. So anyway, we can put them there. The Dakota Sioux history puts them in the Ohio Valley. Then they dispersed. And so what you're going to see of like the effigy mounds that you're going to find through Wisconsin, Minnesota, those were the Winnebago, Ho-Chunk. That's all origins in the Ohio Valley, though. So they were there. Now, they weren't the origins of everything, of being built, but they were there. That is their dead in those burial mounds, in the Hopewellian mounds in the Ohio Valley, throughout Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Kansas, Arkansas. That's all Dakota Sioux. So we're not saying that it's a void of Native Americans. I don't want that to be my point. It's not my point. No, I'm just saying there are other people here.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be your point for sure. But the problem is that any of the cultures, and this goes with any country on the planet, every culture has this oral history of what was there before them, right? That they arrived and stuff was already here. And that's the part when you go to Peru, you go to Mexico, you go to Egypt, here in North America, We have evidence of this everywhere. In it's on the Nevada, California border. I think it's Boulder City, Laughlin. On the Arizona side, the Nevada side, I'm sorry. No, Arizona side of the Nevada border. You go and there's a spot called Grapevine. The Grapevine petroglyphs. This is the largest collection of petroglyphs in North America. All right? I've been there. The largest, right? We don't know anything about them. The Mojave Indians, it's the Mojave Desert. The Mojave Indians say they were here when we got here. We don't know. And on these walls, there's 700 of them, by the way. 700. And you can see, Fritz, a story. You can see it. I can't read it, but they're definitely telling us something. Now, go and read the research, the academic research about the Grapevine petroglyphs. You know what they say? We don't know.
They don't know.
They don't know. They don't know. They put the age on that between 2,500 and 3,000 years ago.
Yeah,
and that's just a
magic
guess. Yep, the magic number.
Joseph Brant, who's a famous Iroquois chief, when he was asked about the burial mounds in the Ohio Valley, he said there is a persistent legend amongst Indians east of the Mississippi that at one time white Indians came from the east who possessed superior knowledge, and they were the builders of the mounds. That's according to him. And that goes through the Iroquois, the Shawnee, Chief Coldfoot. He said the same thing. He said the mounds were already here. There was a people that possessed superior knowledge, and they came here and built these mounds. And see, that's their history. And it's not one. If you go into my books, I have like 30 different Indian legends, and they all talk about the same thing. And so it's not being disparaging to them when you repeat their history.
That's right.
Who these people were.
That's right.
And that's who they believed it was. And it's, of course, they did have superior knowledge. And they said, too, that they were traders and built trading houses. And that would lend itself to Isle Royal, that by the consent of the Indians. By consent, they were up in Isle Royal because they weren't here in great numbers back then. They were just coming here and getting copper and, going. So they weren't really settling then, but they were coming here and extracting. Now, what's interesting, if you look up, it's called the copper culture. If you look at a copper culture artifacts, you're going to have spearheads with midribs, spearheads with sockets, opposed to a tang. Now, they start out tang. Mm-hmm. A tang is just a long tang coming out of your spearhead, but then around 1600 BC, that is replaced by the socket, by the Sumerians, which, according to their histories, gave them an advantage militarily. Now, the socket not only revolutionized weapons, it revolutionized farming, because now they're putting sockets on hoes and shovels, which we still use today.
That's right.
Exact same technology. And here we are in North America where we see this transition from the tang to the socket. Now, how is that serendipitous and not more indicative of these are the people that were coming here and mining it?
Anthropologists will go, it's coincidence. It's in our DNA. Everybody was inventing the same thing at the same time.
Yep.
Save it. Yeah. Fritz, perfect night on the show. Thank you so much, my friend. Where can everybody chase your stuff down? I've got your books up on Amazon, but where else can they follow your work?
I got a website, Nephilim.net, where I have a lot of stories, hundreds of stories on there. Those are for free, but certainly the books are what you're going to do on Amazon. So if you want to see all the mounds and all that, I mean, my travel guide, the Nephilim Chronicles, the travel guide, Nephilim Chronicles, Fallen Angels, the Ohio Valley, of course, to read about the giants, the Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants, 900 accounts of giants in there. And then, of course, you want to get into the paranormal, which is my newest pursuit, Ancient America, The Dark Side, $14.95. It's a great read, and it's really going to open up some doors, especially if you're into paranormal, or if you just want to read a different aspect of burial mounds. And I really get into the mathematics at Newark. They get full scale into that. And gosh, I can't think of his name right now. There's a Indian chief out west carrying around a Sumerian tablet. I can't think of his name right now.
Yes. Yes, the answer is yes. It'll pop up in the chat, everybody. Somebody will have it up there, Fritz. Not a problem. Listen, stay warm. We're in the middle of winter, and you're in Fort Wayne. So stay warm and enjoy the rest of your weekend. I really enjoyed our conversation tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jimmy. Yeah, it was really great talking with you. We'll do this again sometime.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much, Fritz.
Okay.
Perfect. Oh, I just cut Fritz off. I'm sorry, Fritz. Sorry about that. Everybody, tonight is my Friday. It's your Thursday. It's my Friday. Everybody have a great, safe, fun, and amazing weekend. I'll see you right back here on Monday. Until then, Gobekli Tepe. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Gobekli Tepe.